Welcome back to the CircuitSphere. Today, we're diving into one of Apple's biggest failures. And when I say failure, I don't mean, oh no, the iPod socks didn't sell well. I mean a full-on, cube-shaped disaster. Yes, we're talking about the PowerMac G4 Cube. But just like in all good tragedies, there's a silver lining. Or in this case, questionable acrylic. Picture this. It's July 18th, 2000. Steve Jobs walks out on the stage at Macworld. Black turtleneck, jeans, you know the drill. And after an hour of updates, he pulls the classic.
But there's one more thing.
I mean, at this point, if Steve didn't say that, I'd be more surprised. Then, with his usual flair, he reveals the PowerMac G4 Cube. A machine shrunken down into an 8-inch cube of pure futuristic design. The audience gasped, some probably fainted. It was that impressive. What's better than a futuristic cube? A futuristic cube that runs silently with no fan. That's right.
Our engineers have done some brilliant work, and all this power in an 8-inch cube has cooled without a fan. And so it runs in virtual silence.
It was designed to be iconic, and it was, just not for the reasons Apple was hoping. As it turns out, the G4 Cube was destined to live in the Hall of Fame of Apple's most epic flops. Still, despite being a failure, it paved the way for Apple's later, shinier triumphs. Without the Cube, we wouldn't have the iMac G4, Mac Mini, or even the trash can Mac Pro. So the Cube, despite being a dud, gets some credit for being the awkward middle child who turned out to be brilliant in the end. Think of it as Apple's nerdy cousin at the family reunion. Awkward, but going places. The G4 Cube failed for a few reasons. And if you Google Apple's biggest failures, it's always in the top 5. Number 1, price. At $1,799, this thing costs as much as a used car, and guess what? You still needed to buy a monitor. Yeah, you spent $1,799 on a computer, but surprise, you'll need an extra $1,500 to see anything. Nice one, Apple. Second reason, limited upgradability. Apple basically locked you out of customizing the thing, allowing only the hard drive and memory to be upgraded. Pro users took one look and said, nah, I'll pass. You could do more with the regular PowerMac G4. And last but not least, the fragile acrylic casing. Early adopters noticed cracks forming in their beautiful cubes, which was just salt in the wound. Who doesn't love a high-priced item that breaks if you so much as sneeze on it? Here we are with my G4 Cube. This little guy has been a nightmare to work with. But hey, I've been dreaming of owning one since the first time I saw it at the Mac store. Mine's the 450 megahertz model with a whopping 128 megabytes of RAM, an upgraded 128 gigabyte hard drive, and a Rage 128 Pro GPU with 16 megabytes of video memory. That's right, folks, 16 megabytes. Powerhouse of the early 2000s. As per usual, I performed the benchmarks before doing any upgrades, and towards the end, when we go through the post-upgrade benchmarks, I'll also include the benchmark results from before the upgrades. Now, let's talk about the upgrades. First off, the DVD drive was DOA. I stuck a disc in and it vanished into the abyss. So step one was retrieving my sacrificial DVD. But before I get into the nitty-gritty, let me just say, tearing down the cube was like playing a level in Dark Souls. Frustrating, confusing, but oddly satisfying when you finally beat it. I'll be upgrading the RAM to a blazing 1.5 gigabytes, cutting edge stuff for 2000, and replacing the hard drive with an SSD, because who doesn't want to make their ancient cube run like it's on a shot of espresso? Tearing down the cube, like I said, is a bit of an adventure game. You start by flipping it over, pushing in the handle, boom, level 1 complete. Then it gets trickier, removing the metal plate, sliding off the airport card housing, and finally pulling out the DVD drive. It's like unlocking achievements along the way. Now, to crack open the DVD drive itself, we've got 2 screws holding this tiny board that connects the drives to the cube. Once those are out, there are 2 more little screws, one on each side, keeping the metal cover locked down. I carefully lift the cover and boom, the internals are finally exposed. And guess what I found first? The disk I used earlier to confirm the drive wasn't working. So let's go ahead and rescue that. I give everything a good blast of compressed air to clear out any dust. Unfortunately, I didn't have a replacement band for the motor to roller connection, so I improvised with a rubber band. Not ideal, but we'll roll with it for now. Before we test anything though, we need to give the roller bar some serious attention. There's a tiny spring on each side to remove, allowing me to lift this black plastic piece. Then, with a trusty Q-tip and some isopropyl alcohol, I scrubbed the roller clean. And let me tell you, it was filthy. After a few rounds of cleaning, it's time to reassemble everything and see if my quick fix worked. I hooked it up to my Windows laptop and the drive still struggled to receive and eject disks. No big surprise there. My rubber band hack wasn't cutting it. So I hopped on Amazon and ordered some proper bands, which I'll link in the description below. After I replaced the DVD drive's band with an official one, thanks to Amazon, and swapped in the SSD, things were looking good, or so I thought. Spoiler alert, the SSD didn't work out. So I reverted to the original hard drive. You win some, you lose a lot more. Then came the thermal paste debacle. The thermal paste dates back to when I was in 4th grade. It was like scraping dried toothpaste off a counter. But after a good clean and some fresh Arctic Silver 5, we were back in business. Right before I finish putting it all back together and power it on, I take a quick moment to install the 3 sticks of RAM. Installing Mac OS 9, smooth as butter. Installing Mac OS 10 Tiger, more like wrestling a bear. Every time I tried, the cube would freeze, crash, or just give me the death stare. After hours of frustration and a good dose of coffee, I finally got it to work by installing every single version of OS 10. 10.0, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and then Tiger. It was like walking through Apple history just to get it to run properly. All right, let's dive into some benchmark fun. To kick things off, I ran the first set of tests on Mac OS 9 using MacBench 5 and Rave Bench. Before any upgrades, the cube pulled in a performance score of 86,292. Feel free to hit pause and geek out on the detailed breakdown if that's your thing. Now, after the upgrades, things got interesting. I ran the benchmarks again and saw about a 12% drop in performance. Variations happen, sure, but this felt like a red flag. So I dug deeper and ran Apple's official hardware test. And wouldn't you know it, the cube threw a memory error at me. Classic. I pulled the memory sticks out, gave them a little TLC with an eraser, pro tip I've used for ages, reseated them, and voila, problem solved. The next hardware test came back clean. With the memory situated under control, it was time for another round of benchmarks. While the overall performance score only bumped up 2%, RAM upgrades don't make a huge dent here. I did see some nice gains elsewhere. The processor score jumped 4%, the disk score climbed 5%, and the CD-ROM score shot up a solid 11%, thanks to fixing the DVD drive and removing the FireWire drive. When stacking the cube up against other OS 9 machines I've tested, it claimed a respectable 3rd place. It edged out the PowerMac G4 466 MHz, but couldn't quite top the PowerBook G4 Titanium 667 MHz, or the PowerMac G4 867 MHz Quicksilver. Let's break down the SphereScore for the cube. Build quality, 3 out of 5. Sorry cube, your fragile acrylic body didn't do you any favors. Aesthetic design, 5 out of 5. This thing is still turning heads after all these years. And hey, it's in a museum. Expandability, 1 out of 5. You might as well just seal this thing shut after you buy it. Historical significance, 5 out of 5. Without the cube, we wouldn't have the Mac Mini or some of Apple's more successful designs. That gives us a total score of 18 out of 25. Not bad for a commercial flop, huh? In conclusion, the G4 Cube is one of the coolest failures I've ever had the pleasure of working on. It's beautiful, iconic, and a total nightmare. Just like me on a Monday morning. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow tech nerds. I'll see you in the next one here on CircuitSphere. Stay techie, my friends.
Fly so high, I'm hypnotized.